I still haven't figured out an appropriate grading for this channel, so if you have any suggestions, please leave them below. Welcome back to the channel, I guess. As you can see, I still have no furniture despite living in this flat for the past 3 weeks, and my lamp is flickering. So what better topic to talk about today than underconsumption core, the latest in the never-ending series of silly TikTok trends. Except this one is particularly interesting to me because, in case you're new here, first of all, hi, my name is Alina. I make videos about the online book community and a bunch of other things that I see on the internet. About a year ago, I made a video called Booktok and Overconsumption, basically talking about how the book niche on TikTok promotes unrealistic ideas of how many books a person should own or how many books a person should read in a year if they wanted to call themselves a real reader. When I made that video, there was a lot of discourse online about overconsumption on TikTok in the context of fashion and the beauty industry, and just more generally, people were talking about how we just can't seem to stop buying stuff just to feel something. So it's very interesting to see how in just 1 year, we've gone from perceiving overconsumption to be such a problem that everybody, including myself, was writing think pieces about it, to now underconsumption being the latest trend. And just to be clear, telling people to buy less fast fashion is in my top 5 things that should be trending at all times, so I'm definitely not complaining about this. But I am a little bit cautious to celebrate it as a win because, as always, when something is being done or is popular because it's a trend, you never know how long it's going to last, right? Because trends come and go. I have also noticed that when you present something as a trend, it makes it easier for people to dismiss it, even if it's a good thing, because it's just a trend, right? You can either opt in or opt out. And that is what some of the people in the book community are doing. But I am getting ahead of myself. First of all, we have to talk about what underconsumption core is and where it came from. And I also have to tell you about today's sponsor, Milanote. Milanote is a tool for organizing your creative projects. I use it for planning and scripting my YouTube videos, which is a huge step up from the system I had before. Mostly because I'm using the word system very loosely here. It was literally a series of untitled Google Docs with 2 sentences on each of them and a bunch of screenshots of things that I thought were interesting on the internet, which I'm aware sounds ridiculous, but honestly, there aren't that many tools like Milanote out there that allow you a flexible working space where you can bring together text and video and images in a way that makes sense to you. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of the video that you're currently watching and how I put it together in Milanote. So typically when I start working on a video, I make a sort of homepage board for it, my overview board, where I have the video theme and the inspiration for it. And then I have separate boards for my references and for my script. I typically have one board called research, where I keep all of the different articles and TikToks and posts that I'm going to be referring to throughout the video. I have another board, the brainstorming ideas board, where I like to start with the main concept and a couple of lines about what it is, and then I like to bring together the various aspects of it and sort of try to figure out how they relate to each other. So here I have underconsumption, and then I have examples of how it's being talked about in the media, like traditional media, and as opposed to online on social media. Then I have a separate board for the script. Typically my videos are separated into various parts. So I have an intro and then part 1, part 2, part 3, and a conclusion. And one of the things that I find so useful about Milanote is that it is completely customizable. So whenever I see new things, for example, if I see a new article that I want to add the link of, I can just do that and make sure that I have it there. I just put it in the box and it appears, and I have it there and I can move on with my research. Or if I have a new idea, I can just drag a text box in and write whatever my new idea is. And it's just super nice to have everything in the same place and to be able to build on what you already have. And then lastly, towards the far end of my board, I like to keep 2 little sections, one for my immediate to-do list, and then another one for long-term next steps. These are fully customizable, so you can change them, change the colors, give them different titles. It doesn't have to be this. This is just what makes sense for me. So if you want to give it a try, you can use the link in my description to sign up to Milanote for free and with no time limit. According to most mainstream articles I've seen about underconsumption core, and by the way, there are a lot of them, especially in fashion publications, I don't know if they're just doing it for the clicks or they're actually genuinely concerned that people are going to stop buying stuff. The hashtags underconsumption and underconsumption core started to gain traction on TikTok back in July, and they were attached to videos of people either talking about ways in which they have been reducing their consumption or going through their things and showing that you can actually survive with only one of each lifestyle product instead of buying 10 different lip balms and 10 different Stanley cups and every single accessory for the Stanley cup. And the general consensus in all of these publications is that this is obviously a good thing. A lot of people see it as a sign of a collective awakening from this sort of social media induced trance in which we've all been living over the past 15 years, where we've been tricked into believing that the lives of influencers, who by definition are people whose jobs is to buy outfits and go on holiday and take pictures in said outfits, are realistic representations of what life is normally like. So it's great to see so many people collectively pushing against insane ideas like outfit repeating is bad, as if we all lived in this alternate reality where washing machines don't exist. To quote a recent Guardian article on the topic, people are starting to realize that consumerism can make us feel lonely because it pushes us to seek fulfillment and happiness in material possessions rather than meaningful relationships. Many people buy things for fulfillment, but those feelings don't tend to last long. So then they buy something again, and it's a vicious, endless cycle of consumption. True happiness comes from diving into hobbies and passions, spending time with loved ones, and being involved in your community, not from Stanley cups and viral hair dryers. It's interesting to me that this article mentions hobbies and passions because a few weeks into underconsumption core taking off on TikTok, it started to make its way into the Booktok community specifically. A community that centers around a hobby, right? The love of reading. But I think that you can easily make the argument that for some years now, the online book community has become a bit of a content niche, just like home decor or fashion and makeup. And books themselves are becoming consumer products that are not just related to a hobby, but related to lifestyle and home decor even. Let me explain what I mean. For a few years now, we've seen time and time again that any type of content that beauty, fashion, and lifestyle content creators make can easily be adapted into book content. Fashion and beauty hauls can become book hauls. You can easily make book collection videos in the way that people used to make makeup collection videos. Literally any video that influencers have ever made about lifestyle products, you can make about books. And by no means am I saying that this is an evil thing. However, with the rise in popularity of book content, a series of businesses beyond just publishing companies have realized that there's money to be made here. Beyond the reading aesthetic discourse within the online book community, which I'm sure we're all sick of by now, I've been noticing that the bookish look has been picked up by a bunch of fashion houses more recently. Minale makes a point about this in one of her videos where she talks specifically about a fashion house that had models walk the runway holding books. And more recently, I came across this new collaboration between DKNY, which is a major fashion house, and a smaller designer who makes these book bags, which I think look really cool, but I don't know how functional they are. It kind of looks to me like the type of thing you use to carry a book around as a fashion statement. I don't think that this is a very efficient way to carry a book, but maybe that's because I live in a very rainy country. I don't know. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. This is just one example of how the book item is becoming a lifestyle product. Another example is the use of books in the context of home decor, which I'm seeing a lot of at the moment, and it's not necessarily unheard of. People have been collecting the books that they read and displaying them in their homes for centuries, and there's nothing wrong or suspect about that. But it would also be silly to pretend like people don't also do this sometimes to project an idea of intellectualism and refinement. And it would be even sillier to pretend that this is something that just started a few years ago with Booktok and the online reading community. People love to blame teenage girls on the internet for everything, especially the commodification of literature and reading as a hobby. But you don't actually have to look that hard to realize that people have been using books to make themselves look cool basically since the invention of the printing press. 20 years ago, The Guardian published an article based on a nationwide survey done in the UK in which 1 in 3 people admitted to buying a book to make themselves look intelligent. Before that, all throughout the 20th century, people used to buy whole collections of encyclopedias, which sure, they used them sometimes to look stuff up, but they also functioned as a status symbol. According to Jack Lynch, author of the book You Could Look It Up, during most of the 1900s, 90% of American families owned a set of encyclopedias, and the figure of the door-to-door salesman was a bit of a cultural figure in literature and media at the time because they were so successful. And according to Lynch, their success was owed in great part to the fact that they were selling not books, but a lifestyle, a future, a promise of social mobility. And if we want to go even further back to the 19th and 18th centuries, there are countless of examples of home libraries of rich Victorians who install them to display the books they had acquired during their travels. It was a very popular thing at the time among upper-class young men to go on the grand tour, and having a big library basically showed that you had traveled a lot. Not saying that these people weren't genuinely interested in scholarship, but having a home library was also undeniably a fashion statement and a status symbol, considering how expensive books were at the time. Today, having some paperbacks lying around your house is nothing out of the ordinary. Most people have them, and it's pretty natural to assume that if you go to somebody's house and you see they have some books, they probably have read them. And I think this is part of the reason why so many people are personally offended by the idea that somebody might be presenting themselves as a bookish person to gain social capital without having read the books that they display in their home or books that they have in pictures on their Instagram profile, for example. Architectural Digest released one of its home tours featuring former Disney star Ashley Tisdale, who let it slip that she didn't actually have any books at her house, and that when she heard that AD was coming over to film the house tour, she sent someone out to buy 500 books to make the room look cute. And people got really mad about this, which was a bit disproportionate, I think. I feel like we would all do that if we knew that this famous magazine was coming to film our house and then post it to a YouTube channel with 7 million subscribers. But I also understand why people felt so upset by it. If reading and being a well-read person is going to be such a universally aspirational thing, then buying hundreds of books to make yourself look well-read without actually doing the work of becoming a well-read person feels like cheating. And in Ashley Tisdale's defense, she does sort of say that she shouldn't have done that in this video.
Obviously, my husband's like, we should be like collecting books over time and putting them in the shelves.
But if you are aware of that, then why not just say that in the video? Why not be like, hey AD, welcome to my house where I live for real. And as a real person, I want to acquire books as I read and enjoy them over time. And for now, I only have these 10. And I have a personal theory as to why Ashley Tisdale didn't say that. She wanted to appear to have bookshelf wealth. What is bookshelf wealth? I hear you ask. Well, it's another one of these silly trends that you don't want to know about, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I came across the term bookshelf wealth at some point last year. I think it was around the time that the last season of Succession came out, and everybody was obsessed with stealth wealth and the old money aesthetic and whatnot. And shelf wealth or bookshelf wealth is another one of these trends that come from this bizarre obsession with looking like you have a lot of money, but like you don't want to look like you have a lot of money. This trying hard to look like you're not trying thing. It's called shelf wealth because it entails using books as well as a bunch of vintage looking home decor items to make you look like somebody who has traveled and collected things along the way. Presumably with the purpose of projecting this image of a cultured, well-traveled person of taste. I made this entire parenthesis, books as fashion items, books as interior decor, and bookshelf wealth, to basically argue that there is a little bit of a diluted idea of book ownership circulating on social media right now. There's a lot of bulk buying of books and this sort of collecting for the sake of calling oneself a collector. And last time I talked about this in the Booktok and overconsumption video, I did get a little bit of pushback from some people saying, so what? If people want to buy 100 books at a time, it's not like they're going to go bad or end up in landfill. And just more generally, if people are going to overconsume anything, better books than fashion or makeup. And I agree, 99% of the time, books are great things to be obsessed with. No argument there. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a significant number of people out there who are buying insane amount of books in the hopes of kickstarting a influencer/book creator career for themselves. And I think one of the reasons why underconsumption even became a topic of conversation on Booktok is because people are starting to notice who is making book content because they love reading and who is trying to start a career for themselves. Not that there's anything wrong with being a content creator, by the way. I mean, hello, what am I doing here? But as I was saying earlier in the video, the book community is kind of catching up with other areas of content creation, and we're seeing the birth of a book influencer figure, a person who receives a lot of PR and gets invited to book prizes and launch parties. And the nature of social media is such that where you have influencers, you will inevitably have wannabe influencers. So I think it's natural for people in the book community to question whether their favorite creators are posting out of a love for reading or because they want to be part of the cool influencer crowd. And a lot of the time, the answer can be both, and that's also perfectly fine. I wasn't super surprised to see underconsumption become a topic of conversation in the context of Booktok, but I was surprised to see the whole range of reactions that the trend got. There are a lot of people genuinely talking about how the trend pushed them to go to the library more or swap books with their friends and colleagues more instead of just ordering new ones off of Amazon. And some people are even talking about how underconsumption core is making them reconsider the way they read and pushing them to slow down and actually reflect on the things they're reading instead of immediately picking up the next book just so they can say that they've read 100 books that year. But the tone in some of these videos is a little bit strange. For example, and big disclaimer, the comments I'm about to make are not about her as a person, but about this specific TikTok.
If you love buying books, if you have the ability to, if you have the money and the resources to be able to go out and buy books and fill shelves, that's so fantastic. If you don't, keep watching. You do not have to buy every single book that you read. I'm crazy. At the library, it's okay to get books from the library and then take them home, read them, and send them back to the library. And then not go out and buy a copy of the book, okay? You can do that. I give you permission. Another thing you can do is read books on Kindle Unlimited and then not go out and buy the physical copy of the book and put it on your shelf. Other thing is you are allowed to buy books secondhand. You don't have to get them all from Barnes & Noble. You can get them from Pango Books. You can get them from Half Price Books. You can get them from the thrift store. You can get them from a free little library. You do not have to go out and buy them.
The reason why this video stuck with me is that initially I thought she was trolling, like being sarcastic, because what do you mean it's okay to get books from the library? What do you mean it's okay to read a book on Kindle and then not buy the physical copy? Also, the amount of books in her book collection is already quite a lot for the average person. So it was interesting to see that she's making this video as an example of what underconsumption is, because this is just average level consumption, in my opinion. Which, from what I've gleaned, is typically the main criticism of underconsumption core as a whole. It seems that we've been living in the social media bubble where the most successful influencers are middle to upper middle class, and we've been so exposed to waste and opulence that we've completely lost track of how the majority of people in the world live. Another very interesting critique of underconsumption is the way that it presents frugality as a cutesy thing that you can choose to do to gain some sort of moral superiority. All the while, people who live frugal lifestyles out of need get demonized for being poor. It's like that trend from a few years ago. Name a thing that's trashy if you're poor, but classy if you're rich. There are a bunch of creators who have spoken more in depth about the poverty cosplay aspect of the underconsumption trend, and I'll put their videos in the description because I think it requires in-depth analysis, which I can't really do in a video about Booktok without losing focus a little bit. But to give you the highlights, people have noticed first and foremost that there's a bit of a disconnect in coming up with an aesthetic or a core to present yourself as against the type of overconsumption that comes from trying to keep up with internet aesthetics. And other people have also pointed out that the tips and tricks that you typically find in these videos that are teaching you how to underconsume are practices that have existed since the dawn of time and are still facts of life, principally among people from marginalized communities. In the book space, using frugality as a way to virtue signal isn't really a thing because having lots of books and by extension being a well-read person is itself a good virtuous thing. And I think that this correlation between having lots of books and being intelligent and educated and all these aspirational things is part of the reason why so many people on Booktok are kind of scoffing at the idea that they could maybe not buy 100 books at a time. When I was researching for this video, I came across a whole series of Booktok videos that are sort of anti-underconsumption trend in itself, where people are showing their overflowing bookshelves and kind of laughing at themselves for their inability to stop impulse buying books. And I don't want to be too harsh on these people because it's obvious that they are self-aware at the very least. And also ultimately people can do whatever they want with their money. Fine, if you have money to spend it. But this sort of, oh my god, what am I like type of attitude did remind me of this video that I watched from a fashion creator called Katie Robinson, who in her analysis of underconsumption core talks about how there has been a rise in self-awareness from a lot of people who know that they overconsume and feel bad about it, but the way they handle it hasn't moved beyond the cynical, knowing one-liner or self-deprecating jokes. The general attitude seems to be, well, I know I'm contributing to a problem, but life is hard and I need my little treat to get through the day. Or another thing I see a lot at the moment is the "can't a girl have any hobbies" type of line, which it's a funny thing to say. And I do see that a lot of people are using it ironically, but I don't think that we can sarcastically laugh our way out of climate collapse. We need to come up with something better. And I want to emphasize that I don't think that buying fewer books is going to save the planet. But I do think that the way we've started to treat books and hobbies over the past few years is indicative of a larger trend in turning every single hobby into a consumer activity. It reminds me of this passage towards the beginning of Brave New World where the narrator is describing the games that exist in the universe of the novel, and the purpose of games in the world state is to provide fun, but there are no simple games like hide and seek or tag. The only games allowed are super equipment heavy, so you can't partake unless you have this intricate and expensive kit. I feel there's a similarity there with the way that the publishing industry and the reading community have become increasingly merch and gadget focused. It seems like every major book release at the moment comes with some sort of hat or candle or mug. I say this as somebody who receives the Mariana Enriquez Shady Person hat, which I loved, by the way. I wore it every single day for like a week until a couple of days ago when this man saw me and went, she's a shady lady. And now I can't look at it anymore. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that there seems to be a lot of stuff that comes with being a reader now. Not just books, but like objects, stuff. Tote bags and hats and candles and branded bookmarks and mugs and t-shirts. In my last video, I included book sleeves in this list and received many comments explaining why book sleeves are actually very important. So I hope the people who were upset then are now happy to know that they've successfully bullied me into submission. I hope you're happy. Personal drama aside, what I'm trying to say is that I don't think Booktok is above underconsumption core. Even if you wanted to argue that no number of books is too many books, there's still this other huge book adjacent industry that is being shoved down people's throats. Like the other day, the algorithm was showing me this ad for a reading chair. It was just a chair, just an armchair. But clearly, I often search book-related things, so the digital marketing powers that be figured that I would be more likely to click on it if they called it a reading chair. I don't know. On a final note though, I do want to reiterate that I don't think there's anything wrong with having lots and lots of books, and even some bookish trinkets. Between my partner and I, there are around 600 books at my house right now, so it would be pretty hypocritical of me to argue otherwise. But again, that is the product of two people being really into reading for years and years. And in fact, I believe that the reason why a lot of people are buying so many books at once is because they want to achieve this look of having had a long and well-read life. Everybody wants to have the kind of library that a 70-year-old has. Everyone wants to come across as well-read and educated, but few people have the patience to become well-read and educated. And in fact, I've seen a bunch of videos of people showing their nearly empty shelves and talking about how they hope they'll live long enough and have enough time to read that one day their shelves will be full, and if they're lucky, they might even pass that library on to a future generation, which seems to me like a more organic way to accumulate books. And this applies to clothes and jewelry and art and all sorts of things that people like to collect. I was recently thinking about this in the context of the eclectic grandpa aesthetic, which is another one of these fashion aesthetics that is very popular online right now, in which people combine quirky vintage items with newer items in an effort to look like they've had a very long life of collecting things. But the irony is, if you want this look right now, when it's trendy, you have to bulk buy all the eclectic stuff all at once. And it's increasingly obvious to me that with trends like this and the bookshelf wealth thing, people are trying so hard to create this image of a life that has been well lived and interesting without realizing that there is no shortcut to that. All you can do is hope that you live long enough and are lucky enough to have interesting things happen to you so that one day you become an interesting person. But anyways, this is starting to feel like a TED Talk, so I'm gonna leave it here. Bye.